We want to begin this segment by taking a quick look at some popular advertising from the 1950s. Take a look at these images.
Wow, that is a lot of gadgets. And these women look so happy to have them, don't they, Thomas?
They really do, Keatsy. See this woman who's apparently waxing her floors. How effortless is this, says her right hand, barely touching the mop handle, while the left hand is indicating how much fun this is.
And look at the woman with the washing machine. Look at the ta-da gesture with her left hand. This is no work at all.
No, you're absolutely right. But seriously though, these ads were part of the illusion that women were actually very happy staying at home and doing domestic chores. And since they had all these machines, you couldn't even really call it labor or work since the machine did everything for them. So the whole idea of labor was erased from the ideal picture of the upper middle class and replaced with a sense of luxury, at least as far as women were concerned.
But listen to some of these quotes from actual women interviewed by Betty Friedan when she was doing research for her book. "I feel empty somehow, incomplete," says one of them. "I have a tired feeling, a feeling like crying for no reason." And this one, "I feel as if I don't exist." These are not happy women, Thomas. These are women in existential crisis about their lives and identities.
Betty Friedan is often credited with initiating what we call the second wave of feminism with her 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique. Focusing on the middle and upper middle class housewife in mostly suburban America, Friedan's research unearthed what many called the problem without a name. Young women, mostly college educated, financially secure, married, with children, who in spite of having all the security and comfort that their middle class lives could afford, nevertheless suffered from depression, strange ailments, and a sense of unfulfillment.
Second wave feminism brought gender front and center, unmasking the sexism that kept women out of college on the grounds that higher education would make a woman unfit for domestic life, and keeping college-educated women out of fulfilling jobs. The problem of what was called the educated housewife was that she would have trouble with, I quote, adjustment to the feminine role. Popular magazines highlighted the duties of the good wife as one who kept the house and children clean and quiet and asked no questions. Consider this list of suggestions for housewives in the magazine Housekeeping Monthly. The date is May 13th, 1955, and it's called The Good Wife's Guide.
Be happy to see him, greet him with a warm smile, and show sincerity in your desire to please him.
Do you think maybe she wasn't happy to see him and therefore needs to be told to appear happy, show a sincerity that may not be there? And listen to this. Don't complain if he's late home for dinner or even if he stays out all night. Count this as minor compared to what he might have gone through that day.
Right, because his work, probably behind a desk in an air-conditioned office, is real and considered exhausting labor, while the woman's actual physical labor at home is just her being happy. But here, listen to this. Arrange his pillow and offer to take off his shoes. Speak in a low, soothing, and pleasant voice. Don't ask him questions about his actions or question his judgment or integrity. Remember, he's the master of the house, and as such will always exercise his will with fairness and truthfulness. You have no right to question him.
Yep, which brings us to the grand finale and conclusion of this advice column, the last suggestion for being a good wife. A good wife always knows her place, which is really the point of all these small tips about how to keep a clean home and so on, making sure that the woman knows her place, especially if she has a college degree and a brain. Combined with these advertisements for electronic household appliances, these messages reinforced the idea that domestic life was easy and fulfilling and that women thrived on cooking and cleaning and child rearing. Perhaps the greatest achievement of second-wave feminism was to make public the clear gender demarcations of the domestic from the professional spheres, where intellectual and professional work was exclusively male, while physical and domestic work was clearly female.
And look at these ads. Clearly, domestic violence was very much a part of the happy housewife's life, with popular endorsements of wife beating on the excuse of advertising ties, coffee, shoe polish, hair products, and other masculine accessories. So the crisis may have been more than just existential, except that women did not see being beaten as a crime or something that was not supposed to be part of their lives.
And since we're talking about a woman's place, here it is, under the heel of the man. The feminist idea that women should not be relegated to domestic and maternal duties, but should be given as much access to higher education and meaningful jobs as men, laid the foundation for much of the feminist movement to follow. However, these premises too were interrogated by thinkers like bell hooks, who pointed out the concealed biases of class and race and their intersection with gender in feminist thinking. As she says in her introduction to her book, From Margin to Center, to be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside the main body. As Black Americans living in a small Kentucky town, the railroad tracks were a daily reminder of our marginality. Across these tracks were paved streets, stores we could not enter, restaurants we could not eat in, and people we could not look directly in the face. Across these tracks was a world we could work in as maids, as janitors, as prostitutes, as long as it was in the service capacity. We could enter that world, but we could not live there. We had always to return to the margin, to cross the tracks to shacks and abandoned houses on the edge of town. Showing how the second wave had been almost exclusively centered on white women of the middle to upper middle classes in America, Hooks asks some uncomfortable but necessary questions. Who will bear the burden of the white woman's freedom from her domestic duties? Who will cook and clean and look after the children when the upper-class white women go to work? The answer, as Hooks makes clear, reveals the ways in which women of color were rendered invisible by white feminists, their labor and rights excluded from feminist frameworks.
Bell hooks and the third wave of feminism bring the poor, white woman and women of color from the margins to the center of the discussion, forcing Western feminism to confront its biases of class and race and expanding it to include the voices of Asian, Latina, and African American women. Gloria Anzaldúa and Barbara Christian talk about how these voices are kept out of the public mainstream or from academic forums, exposing the structures of power that keep women of color out of publications, seminars, and conferences. Taking into consideration the effects of racism on people of color in America, Alice Walker includes men in her vision of feminism, coining the term womanism, a movement that sought to include men as well as women in the struggle against the three-pronged forces of race, class, and gender. Here's one of my favorite quotes by bell hooks that shows how much wider third-wave feminism spreads its net. Feminism is not simply a struggle to end male chauvinism or a movement to ensure that women will have equal rights with men. It's a commitment to eradicating the ideology of domination that permeates the Western culture on various levels: sex, race, class, to name a few, and a commitment to reorganizing society so that self-development of people can take precedence over imperialism, economic expansion, and material desires. It's interesting to see how each successive wave of feminism used the foundations of the previous wave to build upon and expanded feminist consciousness to become more and more intersectional.